Hey there everyone, my name is Gage, LaPierre, and today we're over here at Natural Areas Teaching Laboratory. This site is right here on University of Florida's main campus, and the particular site that we're standing on right now is considered an upland pine community. As you can see from this awesome overstory of longleaf pine, we also have some southern red oaks here and mockernut hickories. As you can recall from some of our earlier videos of how you can tell an upland pine community. One of the things to kind of note about myself, I'm a graduate assistant. I also do some work with working out here and volunteering my time as the co-chair of the NATO Operations Committee, which basically helps manage and restore and enhance all of these natural communities. So one of the things I want to do today is I want to kind of take you through a site where it is in very early restoration, and I want to talk a little bit about invasive species. So invasive species in general are, well, how did we get invasive species here? And the main invasive species on this site that we're actually battling continually is what's called guinea grass. And guinea grass is a prolific seeder. It does survive fires quite well, and one of the things to note about it, and which is kind of a characteristic of it, of a lot of other invasive species, is it thrives in these areas that are disturbed. And what do I mean by disturbed? I mean an area that has a lot of soil disturbance, has a lot of area where the natural community has been displaced, and we've lost a lot of the things that would fill these spaces. So as you can see here, there's a lot of sand. There's not a lot of existing native vegetation that's out here. So this has filled the void, and it's done so quite successfully. I kind of want to show you guys how much guinea grass is here. And so something else to take note of why is it here? Well, it had to come from somewhere, and like a lot of these invasive species, they were brought over outside of North America from other continents, for cattle foraging purposes, like a lot of other invasive grasses. Some of the other things that, some of the challenges with dealing with this invasive and with a lot of other invasives is that we have to try to manage for this one species in terms of eradicating it. But then something else we also have to do is we have to balance that with restoration and bringing in new species. So this is a site that we're kind of trying to wait guinea grass out. We're trying to, we're relentless on herbicide, and we're trying to minimize future soil disturbance out here, and then trying to just eradicate any new populations that come up. This area was actually burned a few months ago, and as you can see, as a result of there not really being much of an existing native vegetation that was out here, the guinea grass was able to come back quite prolifically. So this is a big challenge for areas where we're trying to restore using fire. And Natural Areas Teaching Laboratory is just one example of this. Something else that I think is worth mentioning with certain invasive species like grasses is that they are just so hard to get rid of without herbicide. You know, fire alone cannot get rid of this grass. I cannot have enough people come out and pull this grass, and as you can see, it is just super abundant. So right now I'm actually standing on the edge of the NATO. This is a berm that's in the very back of the Natural Areas Teaching Laboratory. And one of the things that often happens is we just don't have enough personnel to manage all of our invasive species. So some invasive species end up getting put on the lower end of the spectrum, mainly the ones that don't cause nearly as much damage as some of the other ones. And this is one in particular. This is a mimosa, and mimosa can grow very tall, as you can see. It can get quite large, and it can produce a lot of seeds. Now, why would this be one that we not really choose to manage? Well, mainly because it's in a very hard to get spot, like this one. We're standing on the edge of a berm. And then the other thing about it is too, it's one of these where once we cut it, we have to put herbicide on it, and it's another one where it's just really difficult to get to some of these places. And this is another one that tends to grow in hammock areas. So in our natural areas that we're trying to maintain actively, this is on the very edge of our basin. And this is, again, another issue with invasive species. And sometimes we can't always get everything. We just can't always get some of these things on the fringes of our areas that we manage. So Mimosa, this one will have to wait for another day. So, another invasive species that's here at Natal is Caesarweed. Caesarweed is similar to Mimosa tree and guinea grass in that it grows in these areas of disturbance, areas that have been cleared in the past of its native vegetation, and areas that had the soil disturbed. Something that's interesting about Caesarweed is that it ends up proliferating quite extensively if we allow it to. But interestingly enough, it's not so bad as guinea grass, where we have to really be very mindful of controlling it. So this is one where we're not putting all of our time and energy in trying to annihilate it, but it's something that we're still managing for. So something else that I want to point out here with Caesarweed and also guinea grass, both of those species are species where when we mow along trails and things like that, we have to be mindful where we're mowing, because those seeds can get attached from guinea grass and also Caesarweed and then get spread into other areas in Natal. So just another thing with invasive species that you have to keep in mind, both the balance of managing for multiple different invasive species and then also being mindful of where we're spreading them to. And I'm over here again at Natural Areas Teaching Laboratory, and talking about invasives today. And another invasive that is a constant concern that we have to deal with at Natural Areas Teaching Laboratory is air potato. And air potato is this guy right here. So something that's interesting about air potato is that it wasn't too long ago where, and some of you may have heard about this before, but we've had a biological control come into play in managing this species, and that has really helped us a lot here at Natural Areas Teaching Laboratory, where we have been able to get some of these beetles that eat this particular species, and it doesn't harm any of our other natural communities. This is provided through extension, and this is also a great tool to be able to really manage the species. Again, it's not going to annihilate, it's not going to eradicate the species, but it will help really control and manage for it. And something else I want to kind of quickly highlight while we're here is that air potato and several other invasive species like coral Ardisia, that's another big one that we have really been able to tackle here at the Natural Areas Teaching Laboratory with herbicides. But something to take note of is that sometimes when areas are not managed, when we have natural areas that are that may look something like this area where there has not been this natural presence of fire, we don't manage the area in terms of removing some of these invasive species. Certain invasive species can really become a problem, and these shade tolerant species like coral Ardisia, air potato can really thrive in these shady areas where what naturally may have been a pine savanna. Okay everyone, so we just made it to another part of Natal, and we're looking at a different invasive species called camphor. And camphor is a tree that can grow very, very large. If some of you are in South Florida, you may have seen some that were planted over 100 years ago in some of the urban areas, because it was actually touted throughout Florida and throughout the Southeast as a great ornamental tree to plant. But unfortunately, it has a negative side effect of harming our natural areas, in that it can actually produce a lot of seedlings, as you can see right here underneath, and the birds can actually spread the seeds. And then in some cases they can actually just spread on their own along waterways too. But what really is interesting about this one is, and from a management perspective, is it tends to grow in hammocks. And in some hammocks, you used to have a minor fire regime or a flooding component to those hammocks and those natural areas. And here, in this area that we're at in Natal, this area hadn't received fire in more than, I would say probably close to 50 years. So this year will actually be the first year we actually put fire back in here. And this is a camphor that has resprouted that we actually cut down. One last thing to note about camphor, what is pretty interesting about it is Vicks vapor rub. So it actually smells very well, very, very pleasant. But it is nonetheless a noxious invasive plant that is found all throughout shady areas in Florida. So be on the lookout for this.